Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving head first today into a world that just screams luxury, prestige, pure decadence.
Caviar.
Caviar, exactly. Those tiny bursting pearls of flavor, that nutty, creamy taste. It's really unlike anything else.
Yeah, it really is. And for centuries, that whole experience, that specific taste, has been tied almost exclusively to wild sturgeon.
Especially from places like the Caspian Sea, right?
That's the classic source. But here's where the story gets tricky. A bit concerning, actually.
Concerning how?
Well, those classic wild sources, they're in deep trouble. Serious trouble.
Overfishing.
Massive overfishing. It's pushed these incredible ancient fish species right towards the brink. Extinction, potentially. It's a huge conservation issue.
So the sort of traditional path to this ultimate luxury food is, well, it's disappearing. It's unsustainable.
It really is, which kind of sets up our mission for this deep dive, doesn't it?
It does. Can we actually find sustainable alternatives? Maybe even more accessible ones. Alternatives that can genuinely, stand toe-to-toe with the taste, the texture of classic wild beluga.
Can farming really deliver that same wow factor? That's the question.
And our source material, it takes us on this pretty remarkable journey to see one place trying to prove it can be done.
We're heading to Andalusia, southern Spain.
Right, to a place called Rio Frio Caviar.
They've spent, get this, 25 years figuring out how to farm sturgeon properly. It's incredibly complex.
And we have a guide, their export manager, Keith Jaggard. A fellow Brit, actually.
Yeah, and he walks us through the whole thing. We're going to trace the entire path, starting right at the foundation of the water.
The water source that makes this farm viable.
Then follow the fish, their long lives, see the harvest, the processing.
And even how the final product gets used in a really high-end dish.
Let's jump in. So the location, southern Spain, it seems counterintuitive maybe, but the water, that's everything.
Everything. How so?
So what makes this spot in Andalusia so special is this completely natural spring, just a couple hundred meters away from the farm itself.
Okay.
And it's not just that it's clean, it provides this incredibly consistent water temperature. We're talking 13 to 15 degrees Celsius all year round.
And that specific temperature range, that's key for sturgeon.
Absolutely vital. Sturgeon are, well, they're quite sensitive fish. This cool, stable temperature perfectly mimics their ideal natural environment.
So it's giving them the perfect conditions.
Exactly. It keeps them healthy, reduces stress, and ultimately that leads to better quality eggs. The source even mentions the water's drinkable. That purity is a massive plus.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a fish farm. It's like a meticulously recreated habitat.
Pretty much. Now let's talk about the fish themselves, the stars. We hear about the young ones, the tidlers, small, delicate.
But the real story is the females, right? The ones that produce the caviar.
That's where the time commitment really hits you. The reporting highlights something kind of astonishing. It can take up to 20 years for a female sturgeon to be ready for harvest.
20 years.
Yep.
That is just an incredible investment. Time, money, patience before you see any return at all. What does that tell you about getting into this business?
It tells you it's not for the impatient. It requires serious long-term vision and serious capital for infrastructure.
And when those fish finally are ready, they're big.
Oh, yeah. We hear about the reality of, wrestling fish that weigh up to 60 kilos out of the water just for a checkup.
60 kilos. That's a serious fish to handle.
Definitely.
And how they check them for the caviar, that's quite modern, isn't it?
It's fascinating, actually. They use ultrasound.
Like a pregnancy scan.
Exactly like that. The analogy is spot on. But instead of looking for a tiny heartbeat, they're looking for the developing eggs.
So what are they seeing on the scan? What tells them the eggs are ready?
They're looking at the size, the density, the overall stage of development. The goal is to catch them at that perfect moment, the optimum quality.
Which means just before the fish would naturally spawn.
Precisely, because spawning changes the eggs, makes them softer, less desirable for caviar.
Ah, okay. So it's all about timing, guided by tech. We heard about one fish they scanned, wasn't quite ready.
Right, needed maybe another 6 months. That level of precision is crucial.
And getting them out, scanned, and back in the water calmly. That takes skill with such big fish.
For sure. And when they're ready for the harvest, the whole operation moves indoors.
Into a facility described, memorably.
Huh. Yeah. Like a operating theater.
Right. That definitely paints a picture. Sterile. Clinical.
Which makes sense, right? For such a high-value, delicate product,
Yeah.
it emphasizes the care, the hygiene they need.
And speaking of value, With fish worth so much, potentially carrying thousands of pounds worth of eggs, security must be a big deal. Underwater guards, lasers.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But the reporting gave a slightly more grounded answer
Oh, yeah.
when asked about security. Not high-tech gadgets, just big dogs.
Big dogs. Okay. Simple, effective. I like it.
Maybe less exciting, but probably works.
Right. So let's move from the tanks to the processing room, that operating theater. Fish is ready. What's the extraction like?
It's described as very clinical, very precise. We even hear about a chef being involved using a scalpel.
A scalpel. Wow.
Yeah, noting exactly where the main mass of eggs begins inside the fish. Very careful work.
And once the eggs, the roe sac, is out, separating the individual eggs sounds incredibly delicate.
It really is. That's the crucial first step. Gently rubbing the eggs against a screen, usually. Just enough pressure to free them from the membrane.
Without bursting them.
Exactly. One burst egg can affect others. Utmost care needed.
And right at this stage, just separated, before much else happens, the value is already huge.
Immense. We heard that a single batch, maybe from 1 or 2 fish being processed, was worth well over 10,000 pounds.
10,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Just for the raw, separated eggs. Wow, it really drives home how precious this stuff is.
Absolutely. So after they're separated.
They get rinsed. Cold, salted spring water,
Yeah.
keeping it pure.
And then comes maybe the most critical step for flavor. The salt.
Adding sea salt, not just for preserving it.
No, it's much more than that.
Huh.
It dramatically enhances the flavor, transforms it, really.
How does it do that? What's the salt actually doing to the eggs?
Well, it firms them up just slightly, gives them that characteristic pop. But more importantly, chemically, it draws out moisture and concentrates those inherent flavors. The nutty, the buttery, the oceanic notes. It unlocks the caviar's potential.
And this is done carefully by hand.
Very gently, yes. Folding the salt in, ensuring even distribution without damaging those delicate pearls.
The source material actually mentioned a taste test of the eggs before the salt was added.
Right. Freshly harvested, unsalted.
How were they described?
As while needing salt. Lacking that depth, that complexity, but also extra.
Extra.
Yeah, like tasting something incredibly pure, a raw treasure. But it really highlighted how vital that salting step is. It brings everything into focus.
Fascinating. Like seeing the raw potential before it's fully realized. And after salting, they don't just tin it up and sell it straight away.
No, there's another waiting game. Maturation.
So the caviar is seasoned, salted, and then it sits for a while.
Exactly, it matures. The specific tin they discussed had been matured for about 4 months.
4 months. What happens during that time?
The flavors continue to develop, to deepen, to harmonize. The salt integrates fully. It becomes a more rounded, complex product.
And the value goes up again. That matured tin, 3,500 pounds.
3,500 pounds for one tin. It's just incredible to track that value creation from water and fish food over 20 years to that final tin.
And the verdict on this farmed product from those who tasted it in the report.
Very, very positive. They said it really could give wild caviar a run for its money. Described it as delicious, very creamy.
So it sounds like mission accomplished. They've managed to create a genuinely high-quality, sustainable alternative.
It certainly seems that way based on this account, a real testament to their patience and methods.
Okay, so they've done the hard part. They've produced this amazing farmed caviar. What next? You have to show it off, right?
Exactly. The source material then pivots to the kitchen. How do you use an ingredient like this?
They created a dish specifically designed to highlight it.
A lobster potato salad with a special mayonnaise. Definitely leaning into luxury.
It sounds incredible. We got a few details on the prep. Tying the lobster tails to keep their shape.
Poaching them with aromatics, bay leaf, citrus, fennel, star anise, coriander. Building flavor layers.
Parboiling potatoes, making the mayo from scratch.
Yeah.
Egg yolks, mustard powder, white wine vinegar.
Slowly whisking in olive oil for that emulsion. And then a little twist.
The truffle oil.
Yeah, a bit of truffle oil added to the mayonnaise.
Why truffle? What does that bring alongside the lobster and caviar?
Well, truffle has that unique, earthy, pungent aroma and flavor. It's another luxury note. It complements the richness of the lobster and the creamy potato and mayo, and it kind of stands up to, but doesn't overwhelm, the caviar. It adds complexity.
Makes sense. And they did something specific with the lobster after poaching it, too.
Right, a quick sear. Just 30 seconds aside in a hot pan.
Why do that? Isn't it already cooked?
It is, but that quick sear does a couple of things. It adds a little texture, stops being uniformly soft, and it adds flavor through Maillard reaction, that little bit of browning. Crucially, it's fast, so the lobster doesn't get tough or chewy.
Smart. It's those little details.
Absolutely. Then the plating, sliced potatoes, medallions of the seared lobster, that truffled mayo on the potato, a lightly dressed salad,
And the grand finale.
spooning that farmed caviar right over the top, the crowning glory.
The chef's reaction
Yeah.
sounded pretty definitive.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely amazing. He even called it a perfect dish for the Last Supper. High praise.
You can't get much better than that. It sounds like the ultimate proof of concept for the farm, seeing their caviar shine like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
A salad of potato, lobster, truffle mayo, and their amazing farmed caviar.
So if we just sort of pull back for a second and think about everything we've covered in this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's quite a journey
It really is. From that specific pure water source in Spain,
through that incredibly long process, up to 2 decades of raising the sturgeon.
the precision of the harvest, using ultrasound, getting the timing just right.
The careful, almost ritualistic processing, separating, salting, that crucial maturation.
And finally seeing this incredibly valuable luxury product take center stage in a dish designed just for it.
It really hammers home a few key things, doesn't it?
Definitely. Like the absolute non-negotiable importance of the environment, that water source.
And the sheer patience and capital needed. That 20-year time frame is mind-boggling.
The blend of, ancient creatures and really modern tech like the ultrasound.
And the big takeaway, that farmed methods, done this carefully, can produce a sustainable luxury product. One that, according to this, genuinely rivals the wild original.
Yeah. What really stands out to you from all this, maybe it's that time scale. 20 years is just...
Wow, it is. Or maybe it's the contrast. Wrestling a huge fish 1 minute, then this incredibly delicate process of separating eggs the next.
Or even the dogs. The sort of surprising low-tech security for such a high-value thing.
Yeah. It shows producing luxury isn't always what you expect. It's this mix of nature, tech, patience, and sometimes just big dogs.
Exactly. So thinking about all the patience, the tech, the conservation angle, the sheer value, what does this whole deep dive suggest about the future, maybe, of other high-end ingredients?
That's a great question. With all the environmental pressures mounting, how might other traditional luxury foods be reimagined? Things like, I don't know, wild truffles, maybe certain rare seafoods, even spices. Could sustainable farming or lab-based innovation be the future there too?
It's definitely something to think about. Where else could this blend of patience, technology, and respect for the source lead us?